Okay, so you've probably heard the story. A pilot, a doctor, a lawyer, all before he could even legally drink. His life was so wild it became that huge Hollywood blockbuster, Catch Me If You Can. But what if I told you the greatest con Frank Abagnale Jr. ever pulled wasn't any of those famous impersonations?
I mean, this is the legend, right? It's all built on him successfully pretending to be these incredibly high-status professionals. A Pan Am pilot, a chief resident pediatrician, a state prosecutor, the list goes on. And here's the part of the story that just blows everyone's mind. He supposedly did all of this while he was still just a teenager. It is an absolutely dazzling tale. But how much of it is actually real?
So let's start by diving into the story that we all think we know. You know, the one that got popularized in his book and then brought to life on the big screen.
It's that classic, charming, rogue story. And what's really fascinating here is how the director, Steven Spielberg himself, saw it. He actually compared the story to movies like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and The Sting. So right away, he's setting Abagnale up not just as some criminal, but as this cool, anti-establishment hero you can't help but root for.
His first and probably most famous con was becoming an airline pilot. And the way he tells it, it was just brilliant in its simplicity. He saw the power that uniform held, the instant respect it got. So he just called Pan Am, said he was a pilot who'd lost his uniform, and they gave him the supplier's name. A quick forged ID later, and boom, he was in business.
And that pilot uniform was basically a key to the entire world. According to his story, he deadheaded, that's flying for free in the cockpit, on more than 250 flights, hitting up 26 different countries. He claims he used that authority to cash a mind-boggling $2.5 million in bad checks. And then he just seamlessly switched into other roles, like supervising doctors or even prosecuting cases for the state of Louisiana, which is just incredible.
But, you know, every good run comes to an end. His capture in France when he was 21 wasn't the end of his story, though. In a lot of ways, it was the beginning of a second act that's maybe even more unbelievable. So, after doing time in French, Swedish, and U.S. prisons, the story goes that the FBI saw his unique talent. They supposedly offered him a deal. Help us catch guys like you, and you can get out of prison early. And so, after serving less than 5 years, he was paroled and started a whole new life. And he totally reinvented himself. I mean, he went from one of America's most wanted criminals to one of the world's most respected experts on fraud prevention. He was lecturing at the FBI Academy, for crying out loud, and developing security programs that thousands of companies still use. His turnaround was so complete, so total, that he got this huge praise from the very people who made his story famous. Tom Hanks, the guy who played the FBI agent chasing him, called his lecture the best one-man show you will ever see. I mean, come on, that's the perfect bow on a perfect story. A perfect story of crime and redemption, but maybe a little too perfect. Because over the last few years, journalists and researchers have been digging up public records that, well, they tell a very, very different story. A much less glamorous one.
And this leads us to the really big question, the one that kind of challenges his entire legacy. How much of the legendary saga of Frank Abagnale Jr. actually happened?
Okay, so this is where it gets really nuts. There's a huge conflict in the timeline. In his story, between the ages of 17 and 20, he's jet-setting around the world as a pilot, playing doctor, practicing law. But public records, they show that during those exact years, he was inmate number 25367 in a New York State prison for pretty small-time crimes.
And just look at the difference in scale here. His claim is that he cashed millions of dollars in fake checks. But the actual federal court records, they show his conviction was for forging checks that totaled less than $1,500. That's quite a difference.
And those big-time professional jobs? They also start to fall apart when you look closer. The Louisiana bar has zero record of him ever taking the exam. That Georgia hospital where he was supposedly a chief resident? The administrators there say the job he described literally never existed. And the whole BYU professor thing? Yeah, he later walked that back, saying maybe he was just a guest lecturer.
And this isn't a new thing. All the way back in 1981, people he claimed to have worked with were calling him out. The first Assistant Attorney General of Louisiana at the time did not mince words at all. He made it very clear, there is a difference between being an imposter and just making things up.
So all of this really forces you to rethink his entire legacy, right? If the original scams were massively exaggerated,
What does that mean for his redemption story? What does it say about his whole relationship with the FBI and these big corporations he supposedly helps?
His famous partnership with the FBI gets pretty murky too. The FBI flat out denies there was any special parole deal for him to come work for them. He's had to admit he was never on the 10 most wanted list. And that close personal friendship with the agent who caught him, it seems like that was a pretty big embellishment too.
And get this, a retired FBI division head, a guy whose name Abagnale apparently used as a reference, told a reporter back in '78, quote, "That damn Abagnale uses my name all over the place, but I've never even met the guy." Buff.
Now, for his part, Abagnale has admitted that the story was embellished, but he kind of puts the blame on his co-author, saying he wanted to make it a more exciting read. The thing is, though, Abagnale was making a lot of these huge claims himself in TV interviews years before that book was even a thing. So, this leaves us with one last really big thought. If all those high-flying adventures of his youth were mostly made up, then could it be that Frank Abagnale's true masterpiece, his greatest con of all, wasn't pretending to be a pilot or a doctor, but convincing the entire world that he had?